While I distract her, you go to her house and change the locks." Those words hit my ears like a venomous whisper in the middle of my own birthday lunch. Jessica, my daughter, was leaning over the table, speaking right into the ear of Greg, her husband. They thought I couldn't hear them over the murmur of conversations and the clinking of silverware. They thought I was too busy cutting my chocolate cake, smiling for the pictures Ashley kept insisting on taking from every possible angle. But I heard them. And the most terrible part wasn't the betrayal itself. It was how casually they said it. Like someone ordering coffee or talking about the weather. As if kicking me out of my home, the only thing I had built with my own 2 hands over 40 years, was as simple as changing the channel on the TV. Greg nodded. I saw his eyes flick toward me for a fraction of a second, checking to make sure I hadn't noticed anything. Then he got up from the table with an excuse I didn't even register. Something about going to the bank, an urgent errand being back soon. Jessica smiled and squeezed my hand across the white tablecloth. "Mom, you look radiant today. 70 years old, and you look 50. Lies wrapped in cheap compliments. I watched him walk down the restaurant hallway, pull his car keys from his pocket, and look back at our table one last time. Jessica raised her wine glass in a silent toast, a code between them, a signal that everything was in motion. 50 minutes. That's how long it took him to come back. During that time, Jessica focused on entertaining me with an almost theatrical dedication. She showed me photos of my grandkids on her phone, even though I see them every week. She asked about my health, if I had refilled my prescriptions, if I needed help with my monthly shopping. Every question was a calculated distraction, every smile a perfectly rehearsed mask. Ashley, my niece, was also at the table. She didn't know anything. That much was obvious. She was talking excitedly about her new job, about a trip she was planning to the Bahamas. Innocent and oblivious to the play being performed right in front of her. I played along. I nodded. I laughed at the right moments. I tasted every dish they brought. On the outside, I was the pleasant grandmother celebrating another year of life. On the inside, every second felt like an eternity, every minute a reminder that at that exact instant, someone was trying to steal everything from me. But there was something Jessica didn't know. Something Greg was about to find out very, very soon. When he finally returned, his face said it all. He walked into the restaurant like a ghost, his skin so white it looked. His hands were visibly shaking as he gripped the back of his chair. His forehead was dotted with sweat, despite the air conditioning keeping the place cool. Jessica stood up immediately. Alarmed. "What happened? Why did you take so long?" Greg looked at me. Then he looked at Jessica. Then he looked back at me. In his eyes there was something I had never seen before, genuine fear mixed with disbelief. He opened his mouth twice before the words finally came out, choked and panting. "Something went wrong. Your mother. The house." He collapsed into the chair as if his legs had given out. Jessica leaned in urgent, trying to keep her voice down so Ashley and I wouldn't hear. But I was paying attention. Very close attention. "What do you mean something went wrong? Did you do what we agreed to or not?" "I went there, Jessica. I went with the locksmith you hired." "But when we got there..." He paused, running his hands over his face in a gesture of absolute despair. "The house isn't in your mother's name anymore. There are new owners. People were inside living there. They showed me the paperwork. All legal, all signed before a notary. The sale closed 3 weeks ago." The silence that followed was deafening. Jessica froze her wine glass halfway to her lips. I watched her brain process the information, her eyes darting frantically, trying to make sense of the impossible. Then slowly, her gaze landed on me. I was still smiling. Calm, serene. I took a sip of my mineral water and placed the glass gently on the table. Ashley was still talking about her travel plans, completely unaware of the storm that had just broken in silence right in front of her. "Mom," Jessica's voice was controlled, but I could feel the tension vibrating under every syllable. "You sold the house." "Yes, honey, I sold it." There was no need to lie, no need to apologize. It was my house, my property. the result of 40 years of work as a nurse at General Hospital of night shifts that destroyed my back of sacrifices, she never knew about because I made sure she had everything she needed. Why didn't you tell us 3 weeks ago, and I didn't have to tell you anything? I didn't need your permission. Greg was still pale, looking back and forth between Jessica and me, as if watching a car crash in slow motion. Jessica, however, was starting to get her color back, but it wasn't a healthy pink. It was the deep red of contained fury. That house was our inheritance. It was the only thing you were going to leave us. That house was mine, Jessica. Mine, not yours, not Greg's, mine. The words came out firmer than I had planned. Ashley finally stopped talking and looked at all of us, her confusion obvious. You could feel the eyes of the nearby tables turning discreetly toward us. And where exactly do you plan to live now? Jessica's question was dripping with sarcasm. Or did you sell your future too? I have a new apartment, smaller, more comfortable, easier to maintain, in a building with 24-hour security. I already moved 2 weeks ago. And the money from the sale, it's in an investment account, well protected, earning interest that will let me live the rest of my days with dignity. Jessica stood up so abruptly her chair scraped against the wooden floor. Greg tried to stop her, placing a hand on her arm, but she yanked it away. Do you know what you've just done? Do you have any idea how you've betrayed us? The irony of her words would have been funny if it wasn't so pathetic. There she was accusing me of betrayal when just 50 minutes earlier she had sent her husband to steal my home. I didn't betray anyone, Jessica. I protected what was mine. To understand how I got to that moment sitting in a restaurant watching my own daughter fall apart in front of me, I need to go back 42 years, back to when I was 28 and had just been widowed with a 3-year-old girl in my arms. Robert died in a construction accident. A poorly secured beam, a 5-second oversight, and my entire world collapsed. He left me with nothing but debt and rent that was due in 2 weeks. The company's insurance took months to process, and when it finally arrived, it barely covered the funeral and the medical bills we'd racked up while he was dying in the hospital. I remember sitting on the floor of our rented room with Jessica asleep in my lap, looking at the 3 $20 bills left in my wallet. $60 standing between us and the street. I got a job as a nurse's aide at General Hospital the next day. I didn't have a degree, I'd barely finished high school, but the shift supervisor saw something in my eyes. Desperation, maybe, or determination. She put me to work cleaning instruments and changing sheets for $5 an hour. Jessica grew up in the waiting rooms of that hospital. She did her homework while I finished my night shifts. She learned to read surrounded by the smell of disinfectant and endless white hallways. By the time she was 8, she already knew how to take my order from the cafeteria and bring it to the nurse's station without spilling a drop. I worked 16 hours a day, double shifts, triple shifts when they offered them. Every extra dollar meant one more brick closer to having something of our own. I kept the money in a cookie tin hidden under my mattress because I didn't trust banks. In 3 years, I saved $1,200. With that money, I bought a piece of land, a patch of dirt with no utilities on the outskirts of the city so cheap the seller laughed when I asked if the price was real. "Ma'am, there's no water or electricity out there, just dirt and rocks." I didn't care. It was mine. I hired a builder who agreed to let me pay him weekly. Sunday after Sunday, I went to see the walls of our future home go up. Jessica came with me, her favorite doll in her arms, sitting on piles of bricks while I argued with the foreman over every penny spent. It took us 4 years to finish it. 4 years of sacrifices that Jessica never really understood, because by the time we moved in, she was 12 and only remembered living in rentals. For her, the house was just where we lived. For me, it was the result of blood, sweat, and sleepless nights. I managed to get the electricity connected by paying bribes that hurt my soul. The water came 2 years later, when the city finally extended the pipes to our area. By then, I was a registered nurse. I had studied at night, carrying books to the hospital, stealing hours from the sleep my body desperately needed. My salary went from $5 an hour to $9, then to $12. At 40, I was making $15 an hour and working 60 hours a week. $900 a month that went to food utilities in Jessica's private high school because I wanted her to have what I never had. She never went hungry. She never wore secondhand clothes. She never had to choose between notebooks and new shoes. I made sure of that, even if it meant my own shoes had holes in the soles and my nurse's uniform was mended in places no one could see. When Jessica turned 18 and announced she was marrying Greg, an insurance salesman she had just met, I tried to reason with her. Wait, honey, finish college first. Have something of your own before you tie yourself to someone. But she was in love, or what an 18-year-old girl thinks is love, and there was no convincing her. I paid for the wedding. $3,000 I had saved to fix the roof of the house, which leaked every time it rained hard. But she was my only daughter, and I wanted to see her happy, so I spent every cent on a white dress, a decorated hall, and a meal for 120 guests. Greg turned out to be exactly what he seemed, a mediocre man with big dreams and small abilities. He sold insurance when there were clients and when there weren't, which was most of the time he lived off Jessica's salary. She had gotten a job as a receptionist at a dental clinic. They had 2 children, my grandchildren whom I loved from the moment they were born. But raising 2 kids on one salary was impossible, so I helped. I always helped. $50 here, $100 there. I paid for school supplies, uniforms, doctor's visits when they got sick. Jessica never said thank you. She just held out her hand, and I filled the void with bills that represented hours of my life I would never get back. But the house was always mine. That was never up for discussion. It was in my name, paid for with my sweat, built brick by brick with my own decisions and sacrifices, until Richard showed up. Not my husband Robert, who had been buried for decades. Robert's brother Richard, my brother-in-law. He had disappeared from our lives when his brother died and only reappeared 35 years later with a lawyer and a lawsuit. He claimed the land where I built my house had originally been bought by his father, the father-in-law I barely knew, that technically the inheritance had never been legally divided between the brothers, and that therefore 50% of that property belonged to him. He showed up with yellowed papers with stamps that looked legitimate, with a lawyer who spoke in technical terms designed to confuse and scare. He demanded I either sell the house and give him half the money or pay him $50,000 for his share. $50,000 that I didn't have. I spent 2 years in court. 2 years paying a lawyer with every cent I could scrape together. 2 years sleeping 3 hours a night, working extra shifts to cover the legal fees that grew every month like an incurable disease. During that time, Jessica remained strangely quiet. She didn't offer financial help. She didn't ask how I was coping emotionally. She just showed up every couple of weeks to ask about the case, about what the lawyers were saying about the chances I might lose the house. Now I understand why she was so interested. The judge finally ruled in my favor. Richard's papers were crude forgeries. The land had been legally purchased by me with my money without any involvement from my late husband's family. The ruling was clear. The property was 100% mine, with no debt or obligation to anyone. But the process cost me $32,000 in legal fees. It cost me 2 years of my life. It cost me my health as I developed high blood pressure from the constant stress. And it cost me something more valuable. It cost me seeing my daughter's true nature. Because when the judge delivered the verdict and I walked out of the courtroom crying with relief, Jessica didn't hug me. She didn't celebrate with me. She looked at me with something in her eyes that took me weeks to identify. It was disappointment. Disappointment that I had won, that the house was still mine. Because her quiet plan to inherit it soon had vanished in front of a judge who recognized the truth. The months following the legal victory were strange. Jessica started visiting more often, but her visits had a purpose I was slow to fully understand. She would arrive with Greg on Sunday afternoons, always with some excuse. The kids wanted to see Grandma. They were just in the neighborhood. It had been a while since we shared a meal. But I noticed things, little details a mother learns to spot after decades of knowing her child. The way her eyes scanned the rooms, as if taking inventory of every piece of furniture. How Greg would casually ask about the property value now that the neighborhood had improved. The conversations that ended abruptly when I walked into the living room. One afternoon while I was making coffee in the kitchen, I heard them talking on the patio. The window was cracked open, and their voices carried clearly. "She's 70, Greg. She's not going to live forever." It was Jessica's voice, loaded with a coldness that chilled my blood. "I know, but we can't just wait for, you know." Greg sounded uncomfortable, as he always did when facing unpleasant realities. "Why not? It's our rightful inheritance. I'm her only child. All of this will be ours eventually." Eventually doesn't help us. The kids need a bigger house now. We need that money now. We're paying rent when we could be living here. "I know. Believe me, I know. But I can't just ask her to give me the house. We just got out of a lawsuit where she fought like a lioness to keep it." "Then convince her to sell it and give you the money, or to put it in your name. Tell her it's to protect her from future legal problems." There was a long silence. Then Jessica spoke again, her voice calculating, thoughtful. "That could work, but I'd have to do it gradually. First convince her to live with me for a few months, that the house is too big for her alone. Then suggest she rent it out in the meantime, and finally what? Finally make her see that the sensible thing to do is to transfer it to my name, for her own good, for her security." I poured the coffee with shaking hands. Every word was a silent stab. It wasn't the fact that they wanted the house that hurt me. It was the manipulation, the coldness with which they planned to disarm me piece by piece. I walked out to the patio with the tray of coffee and cookies, smiling as if I hadn't heard a thing. They smiled too, took their cups, talked about the weather and the grandkids. Perfect actors in a play I had just discovered had been running for months. The following weeks confirmed my suspicions. Jessica started making comments about how lonely I must be in such a big house. "Mom, you have 4 bedrooms, and you only use 1. Don't you think that's a waste?" Greg mentioned articles he'd read about elderly people having accidents in 2-story homes. "Stairs are dangerous at your age, Deborah. 1 fall, and you could end up in the hospital." Elderly. That word started popping up frequently in their conversations, as if my 70 years had automatically turned me into someone incapable of caring for herself, as if having gray hair and wrinkles meant my brain had stopped working. One night, Jessica arrived with a folder full of brochures. "Look, Mom, I researched some senior living communities, beautiful places where you'd have company activities, nurses available 24 hours. I don't need nurses. I am a nurse. But you're getting older. And these places are wonderful. Look at this one. It has gardens, a ballroom, even yoga classes. And how much does this paradise cost?" "Well, it's an investment, $4,000 a month. But if you sell the house, you'd have enough to—" "I am not selling my house to lock myself in a luxury nursing home, Jessica." Her face hardened for a fraction of a second before she recovered her sweet, concerned smile. "It's not a nursing home, Mom. It's a community. And I'm not saying do it now, just consider it, for your own good." For my own good. Those 4 words became the constant refrain of every conversation. Everything was for my own good. Moving in with them was for my own good. Selling the house was for my own good. Signing papers they wouldn't even let me read completely was for my own good. Greg tried another approach. He started talking to me about investments, about how money tied up in a house doesn't earn interest. You could sell, invest the money, and live off the returns. $600–700 a month without lifting a finger. "I already have my pension from the hospital, $1,200 a month. It's enough. But with more money you could travel, treat yourself, enjoy your old age." Old age. Another word appearing far too often, always loaded with implications of incapacity, of needing supervision, of dependency. But what really opened my eyes was a conversation I overheard by chance 3 months before my birthday. I had gone to Jessica's to drop off a sweater I had knitted for my youngest grandchild. I rang the bell, but no one answered, even though Greg's car was in the driveway. The door was slightly ajar, so I pushed it open, calling their names. Their voices came from the study. They were on speakerphone with someone who had a cold, professional tone. "So what you're suggesting is that we wait until she has a health problem that temporarily incapacitates her?" It was an older man's voice, probably a lawyer. "Exactly," Greg replied. "An accident, a hospitalization, something that justifies her needing help to manage her affairs. At that moment, you would request temporary guardianship, presenting evidence that she can't make decisions for herself. "But is that legal?" Jessica asked. "I mean, she's perfectly fine now. Lucid. Independent." "That's why I said temporarily. A judge could grant you guardianship for 6 months renewable depending on your mother's health. During that time, you would have the legal power to sell properties, manage bank accounts, make medical decisions." "And what if she objects?" "If you can demonstrate she isn't in a condition to object rationally, her objection wouldn't have legal weight. You'd need psychological evaluations, witness statements from neighbors about erratic behavior, that sort of thing." "Erratic behavior that we could suggest," Greg said slowly. "I didn't suggest that. But let's just say that if several neighbors reported concerns about forgetfulness, confusion, personal neglect, that would strengthen your case. And what would your fees be? $5,000 up front, another $5,000 when the guardianship is granted, $10,000 in total, which you would easily recover from the sale of the property." I left that house without making a sound, the sweater still in my hands, and my heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst from my chest. I walked the 4 blocks back to my house because I didn't trust my legs to drive. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my living room, looking at the walls I had watched being built, thinking about every sacrifice I had made to get there, and thinking about how my own daughter was planning to rip it all away using the very laws that were supposed to protect me. I didn't cry. Crying was a luxury I couldn't afford. Instead, I started to plan. The next day, I hired a different lawyer. I didn't tell him about the conversation I'd overheard. I just said I needed to protect my assets from potential future conflicts. He recommended several options: a trust sale with a life estate, or simply selling and reinvesting the money into something more liquid and protected. I chose to sell. The decision to sell wasn't easy, but it was necessary. That house represented my entire adult life. Every corner held memories that hurt to touch. The paint stain on the hallway wall where Jessica had tried to draw butterflies at age 6. The mark on the kitchen door frame where I measured her height every birthday until she turned 15 and refused to continue the childish tradition. The garden I had cultivated with my own hands, where the roses Robert loved before he died still grew. But memories don't pay off corrupt lawyers. Feelings don't stop ambitious daughters. I hired a real estate agent a colleague from the hospital recommended. Her name was Emily Warren, a woman in her 50s, with sharp eyes and a direct way of speaking that I immediately liked. "Mrs. Garza, this property is worth between $180,000 and $200,000 in the current market. The neighborhood has improved a lot in recent years. I can get you a good price." I need it to be fast and discreet. Emily looked at me with that expression women get when they've seen enough of the world not to ask unnecessary questions. "I understand. Family problems." "You could say that." "I've seen it before. Children who suddenly become very interested in their parents' well-being when they smell an inheritance. Don't worry, I can have this sold in 3 weeks if you accept a fair price." "How much?" $185,000. There's a young couple looking in this area. They have the cash ready, they just need the right house. Yours is a perfect fit." 3 weeks. That was how much time I had to dismantle 40 years of my life and start over. To pack every object, every photograph, every piece of my story into boxes that would go to a place I didn't even know yet. "Do it." We signed the papers that afternoon. Emily explained every clause, every legal term, making sure I understood exactly what I was doing. The sale would be for cash, no financing, which meant it could close in less than a month once we found the right buyer. "And where do you plan to move?" she asked, putting the documents in her briefcase. "I don't know yet. I need to find something small, secure, where nobody knows where I am. I know a building downtown, apartments for seniors, but it's not a nursing home. They're independent apartments with 24-hour security, cameras, a doorman. A lot of retired nurses live there. I could get you a 1-bedroom for $900 a month. I can see it today." We went that same afternoon. The building was modern, 6 stories with a clean facade and a small but well-kept garden at the entrance. The doorman greeted Emily by name. She had clearly brought clients here before. The apartment on the 3rd floor was empty and smelled of fresh paint. a small living room with a window facing the street, an integrated kitchen with new appliances, a bedroom big enough for my bed and a closet, and a full bathroom with safety bars already installed. It's perfect. You don't want to think about it. There's nothing to think about. I'll take it. I signed the lease that same day. I paid 3 months in advance with the money I had saved, $2,700 that hurt to take out of my account, but it was an investment in my freedom. For the next 2 weeks, I lived a double life. By day, I was still the Deborah that Jessica knew, the available mother, the pleasant grandmother, the elderly woman who supposedly needed help with everything. By night, I packed in secret. Clothes, important documents, photographs, the few sentimental items I couldn't leave behind. Jessica kept visiting more and more frequently, always with Greg, always with that look of concern I now recognized as completely fake. They brought me food I hadn't asked for, offered to make repairs on the house that didn't need doing, asked constantly about my health. "Mom, you look tired. Are you sleeping well?" "Perfectly, honey. It's just, I've noticed you're distracted lately. You called me yesterday and told me the same thing twice." "Really, I don't remember." I was lying. I knew exactly what she was doing. She was creating her narrative, documenting symptoms they would later use against me. Each visit was a mental record of supposed memory lapses, confusion, signs of cognitive decline that existed only in her convenient imagination. Greg was taking pictures. He thought I didn't notice, but I saw him take out his phone and capture images of the inside of the house. The furniture, the rooms, everything they would later claim as part of the family inheritance that must be preserved. 2 days before the sale closed, Jessica arrived with a proposal. "Mom, Greg and I have been thinking. What would you say to coming to live with us for a few months, just to try it out? You could stay in the guest room. You'd have company. You wouldn't have to worry about the house. And what would happen to this house in the meantime? We could rent it out, get some extra income that would be good for you. I'd take care of finding reliable tenants, collecting the rent, everything. You would just have to enjoy being with your family." It was so obvious it hurt. Once I was living with them, once the house was rented in Jessica's name, it would only be a matter of time before they found a way to take it from me permanently. A paper signed here, a supposed medical emergency there, and I would lose everything without even realizing it until it was too late. "Let me think about it." "There's not much to think about, Mom. It's for your own good." There it was again. For my own good. As if I were incapable of knowing what was best for myself. "Give me a week." "A week, then. But think about it seriously. You're not fit to live alone anymore, Mom. At your age, anything could happen." They left that night and I finished packing. Boxes and more boxes of an entire life reduced to cardboard and tape. I hired a small moving company, the kind that doesn't ask questions and works for cash. I paid them $300 to move everything to the new apartment on a day I knew Jessica would be at work. The sale closed on a Tuesday afternoon at the notary's office. The buyers, Chris and Brenda Foster, were exactly what Emily had promised. Young professionals with a baby on the way looking for their first home. They had the bright eyes of people just starting out, the same hope I'd had 40 years ago when I bought that empty lot. "We'll take great care of your house, Mrs. Garza," Brenda said with genuine sincerity. "We can feel all the love in every corner." I almost cried. Almost. But I held firm, smiled, and signed every paper the notary put in front of me. The wire transfer hit my account while we were still in the office. $185,000. Minus Emily's commission, minus closing costs. I was left with $172,000 clean. "What do you plan to do with the money?" the notary asked as he stamped the final documents. "Invested in something that gives me peace." That same afternoon, I opened 3 different accounts. A long-term investment account that would generate modest but secure interest. An emergency savings account with $50,000 that no one could touch without my personal physical authorization at the bank. And a normal checking account for my monthly expenses. Everything under my name only. No beneficiaries, no co-signers, no way for anyone else to access that money, even if I were declared incapacitated. The lawyer I hired made sure every account was protected with specific instructions. In case of illness or incapacity, the bank was to contact my lawyer directly, not any family member. Any attempt at guardianship or power of attorney would have to go through him first, and he had strict instructions to fight every request as if his life depended on it. It cost me another $2,000 in legal fees, but it was worth every penny. The move to the new apartment was almost anticlimactic. My belongings barely took up half the available space. I realized how much unnecessary weight I had been carrying all these years. Furniture I never used, clothes I hadn't worn in decades, decorative objects that only collected dust. My new life in the apartment began with a silence I hadn't experienced in years. It wasn't the empty silence of loneliness, but the full silence of possibility. Every morning I woke up knowing this space was completely mine, that no one would come to criticize how I decorated it or suggest it was too big for me. But I knew the silence wouldn't last. Jessica would eventually notice something, and I had to be ready for that moment. During the first week in my new home, I established a routine. I had breakfast at the small table by the window, watching the city wake up. I went for walks in the nearby park every morning, meeting other women my age who had also chosen independence. In the afternoons, I read or watched television without the constant weight of wondering when the doorbell would ring with another casual visit from my daughter. I had given my new phone number only to my lawyer and to Emily. I kept my old phone active, but I left it in a nightstand drawer, checking it only once a day for Jessica's messages. They were predictably false. "Mom, I stopped by your house today, but you weren't there. Where are you? Mom, I need to talk to you about what we discussed. When can I visit? Mom, I'm worried. You're not answering my calls. Are you okay?" I didn't answer immediately. I would wait a few hours, sometimes a whole day, before sending short, vague replies. "I'm fine, honey. Busy with some personal matters." Nothing that gave her real information. Nothing that would let her track what I was really doing. 2 weeks passed, then 3. Jessica started to get impatient. Her messages became more insistent, more demanding. "Mom, I need to see you. It's urgent. We need to talk about your future." My future. As if she had any right to decide it. It was Greg who finally showed up at the house, or what had been my house. Chris Foster called me one afternoon confused and slightly alarmed. "Mrs. Garza, there's a man here claiming to be your son-in-law. He's demanding to be let in. He says he needs to pick up some of your things." I explained that the house isn't yours anymore, that we bought the property legally, but he insists there must be a mistake. "There's no mistake, Mr. Foster. The house is completely yours now. My son-in-law has no right to it or anything inside it. If he continues to bother you, call the police." "Are you sure?" He seems very upset. "Completely sure. And Mr. Foster, it's possible more people might show up in the coming weeks making similar claims. Please do not let them in. All the sale documents are in order. You have nothing to worry about." I hung up and poured myself a chamomile tea with perfectly steady hands. So, they had finally found out. I wondered how long it would take them to find me. The answer was less than 2 hours. My old phone started ringing off the hook. Call after call from Jessica, from Greg, even from unknown numbers I assumed were friends or family they had recruited to their cause. I didn't answer a single one. I just sat in my new armchair drinking my tea and waited. The voicemails started piling up. I listened to them that night one by one, like someone listening to a particularly bad play. "Mom, what did you do? You sold the house without telling us. How could you do something like this?" Jessica's voice wavered between disbelief and barely contained fury. "Deborah, we need to talk, urgently. This is very serious. You've made a terrible mistake." Greg trying to sound authoritative, but only managing to sound desperate. "Mom, please answer. We're so worried. Where are you living now? Why didn't you tell us you were going to sell? We had plans. We had talked about your future." Jessica again now trying the worried daughter approach. The last message was the most revealing. Jessica had stopped pretending. "You know what, Mom? This isn't going to stand. That house was our inheritance. We worked for that. We took care of you, expecting you to be fair to us. You can't just sell it and keep all the money. We're going to fight this, legally. Greg already spoke to a lawyer. We have rights." Rights. What an interesting word coming from someone who had planned to strip me of mine. I deleted all the messages and turned off the phone. I wouldn't need it anymore. The next day, Jessica showed up at the hospital where I had worked for 40 years. She asked for me in human resources. She demanded to know if they had an updated contact address in my files. The shift supervisor, Helen, who knew me well, politely explained that the information was confidential and that if I hadn't shared my address with her, the hospital couldn't. She's my mother. She's 70 years old. She sold her house and nobody knows where she is. She could be in danger. Jessica had perfected her anguished daughter tone. Your mother worked here for 40 years. I know her personally. She is one of the most capable and intelligent women I have ever met. If she decided not to share her location with you, I'm sure she has her reasons. The supervisor didn't let herself be manipulated. I knew about this conversation because Helen called me that afternoon on my new number laughing. Deborah, your daughter came in today making a scene. Is everything all right? Do you need help? Everything is perfectly fine, Helen. Just a daughter who can't accept that her mother still has the right to make her own decisions. Ah, one of those. I had one similar. They wanted to put me in a home to get my house. I showed them I can still run faster than they can. She laughed that deep laugh I had always liked. If you need anything at all, call me. I will. Thank you, Helen. But Jessica and Greg didn't give up. They started looking for me systematically. They went to all the places they knew I used to go. The neighborhood church, the supermarket where I had shopped for years, the house of Ashley, my niece. Ashley called me worried. Aunt Deborah Jessica was just here. She says you sold your house and disappeared, that she's really worried about you. What's going on? I'm fine, Ashley. I just made some decisions about my life that Jessica didn't like, but they are my decisions to make. You sold the house. Yes. And you're living somewhere alone. I'm living very well in a safe place with my money protected and my peace of mind intact. There was a silence. Then Ashley sighed. Jessica asked me if I saw you to try and convince you to move in with them. She said something about it not being safe for you to be alone at your age. And what do you think? I think you're the strongest woman I know, and if you made this decision, it was for a good reason. But I also think Jessica is really, really upset. She says she's going to fight this legally. Let her. She has no legal grounds. Auntie, what really happened? Jessica has always been complicated, I know. But this seems more serious. I told her. Not everything, but enough. The conversation I'd overheard about the guardianship, the plans to manipulate me, the corrupt lawyer willing to help them strip me of my autonomy and my assets. Ashley was silent for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was trembling with a mix of anger and sadness. I can't believe she's capable of that. She's your daughter. That's precisely why it hurts so much. What are you going to do now? Nothing. I've already done what I had to do. I protected my assets, I secured my independence, and now I'm going to live the rest of my life in peace. What Jessica does or doesn't do is no longer my problem. But I knew Jessica wouldn't give up that easily. I knew her too well. When she wanted something, she didn't stop until she got it. Or until reality hit her hard enough to make her back down. And we hadn't reached that point yet. 3 weeks of relative silence passed. She didn't try to contact me directly. She didn't show up at the places she used to see me. That silence made me more nervous than all her calls combined. It meant she was planning something, regrouping, preparing her next move. My lawyer called me on a Friday afternoon. Mrs. Garza, I've received a notification. Your daughter has filed a court petition alleging concern for your mental well-being and your ability to manage your financial affairs. There it was. Exactly what I had heard in that conversation months ago. The plan was still in motion, only now I no longer had anything they could take. What specifically does it allege? That you sold your property impulsively and without consulting your family. That you have shown signs of confusion and cognitive decline. That you have isolated yourself socially and are not responding to communication attempts from your only daughter. She is requesting a mandatory psychological evaluation and a hearing to determine if you need temporary guardianship. How serious is this? It depends on the judge. Some take these requests very seriously, especially from direct family. Others are more skeptical. We will need to prepare a solid defense. Do you have any evidence that you are in full command of your faculties? I have a 40-year work history as a professional nurse. I have my retirement records showing I handled all the paperwork myself. I have the complete file from the sale of my house where I signed every document fully aware and with professional counsel. Good, that helps. But we will also need an independent psychological evaluation to prove your cognitive ability, and it would be helpful to have witnesses who can speak to your current state of mind. When is the hearing? In 3 weeks. But before that, the judge has ordered a visit from a social worker to your current residence to evaluate your living conditions. Of course. They wanted to see where I lived, how I lived, looking for any evidence of self-neglect or inability to care for myself. It was part of the strategy I'd heard months ago. Jessica knows where I live. Not according to the documents she filed. She claims she has no knowledge of your current whereabouts, which she is using as additional evidence of your supposed mental decline. She says a person of sound mind wouldn't disappear without leaving an address for her only family. How convenient. Mrs. Garza, I need to ask you something important. Is there any chance your daughter is right? Any moments of real confusion, any significant memory lapses, anything she could use against you? I'm 70, not 30. Sometimes I forget where I left my glasses or what I was going to buy at the store, but my mind is perfectly clear. I sold my house because I found out my daughter was planning to steal it. I moved without telling her because I don't trust her. Those aren't the actions of a confused person. They are the actions of a person protecting herself. Then that is exactly what we will say at the hearing. The psychological evaluation was 3 days later. Dr. Frank Evans was a forensic psychiatrist with 30 years of experience evaluating mental capacity in legal cases. He gave me tests for memory, logical reasoning, and orientation to time and place. He asked me to solve math problems to remember lists of words to explain the meaning of common proverbs. Mrs. Garza, your results are well above average for your age. There is zero evidence of cognitive decline, dementia, or any mental incapacity. Your short-term and long-term memory are functioning perfectly. Your reasoning ability is excellent. From a clinical standpoint, you are completely capable of managing your own affairs. Can you put that in writing? I already have. My report will be available to the judge before the hearing. The social worker arrived at my apartment on a Tuesday morning. She was a young woman, maybe 35, with a tablet in her hand and a professionally neutral expression. Mrs. Garza, I'm Sarah Harris, a social worker assigned by the court. I need to ask you a few questions and observe your current living conditions. Please come in. She walked through the apartment slowly, taking notes. She checked the kitchen, the bathroom, the bedroom. She opened the refrigerator and saw it was well stocked with fresh food. She checked the medicine cabinet and saw my medications organized and up to date. She noted the apartment was clean, organized, and tastefully decorated. You live here alone? Yes. Who helps you with shopping, cleaning, and preparing food? Nobody. I do it myself. Do you have any difficulty performing these tasks? None. I was a nurse for 40 years. I know how to take care of myself perfectly. Why did you move from your previous home? Because I discovered my daughter was planning to take it from me using questionable legal means. I sold the property to protect my assets, and I moved here to have peace. Sarah looked up from her tablet, her eyes showing genuine interest for the first time. That's a serious accusation. It's the truth. I overheard a conversation between my daughter, her husband, and a lawyer discussing how to get guardianship over me based on supposed mental problems I don't have. I took preventative measures. Do you have any evidence of that conversation? My word, and the fact that they are now doing exactly what they plan to do, filing for guardianship based on false claims of mental incapacity. Sarah wrote for several minutes. Then she asked more questions about my daily routine, my social activities, my physical health, my finances. I showed her my bank statements, my rent receipts, my updated medical records. Mrs. Garza, I have to tell you I've evaluated dozens of cases like this. Most are genuine situations where an older person needs help, but some— She paused. Some are relatives trying to take control of assets before it's legally appropriate. And which do you think my case is? I think you are perfectly capable of living independently and managing your own affairs. My report will reflect that. 2 weeks later, My 70th birthday arrived. I hadn't planned to celebrate. The idea of celebrating while facing a legal battle with my own daughter seemed absurd, but Ashley insisted. "Auntie, you can't let Jessica steal your birthday too. Let's just have a small lunch. Just the two of us if you want. But you have to celebrate making it to 70 and still being in charge of your own life." She was right. So I agreed, but with one condition. I would choose the restaurant, and I would give her the address that morning. I didn't want to risk Ashley accidentally telling Jessica anything. I chose a small restaurant downtown near my apartment, a cozy place with good food and a quiet atmosphere. I arrived early and asked for a table near the window. Ashley arrived on time with a small chocolate cake and a sincere hug. "Happy birthday, Auntie. 70 years of being the strongest woman I know." We ordered food, chatted about her life, her travel plans that had finally come together. It was nice to have a normal conversation, without tension, without hidden agendas. We were about to order coffee when I saw something that made my blood run cold. Jessica was walking into the restaurant with Greg. It wasn't a coincidence. The way Jessica scanned the restaurant, the way Greg walked half a step behind her, the look of determination on her face. They had been looking for me, and somehow they had found out where I'd be. My eyes locked on Ashley, who instantly went pale. "Auntie, I didn't—" She called me this morning asking if I'd heard from you. I told her no, but her voice broke. "She checked my phone. She must have done it while I was in the bathroom at her house yesterday. She saw your messages. I am so sorry." I didn't have time to respond. Jessica was already at our table. "Mom, what a surprise finding you here." Her voice was dripping with sarcasm. "Celebrating your birthday with Ashley, but not with your own daughter. I'm not surprised you came uninvited. It seems to be your specialty lately." Greg pulled a chair from the next table, and they both sat down without waiting for permission. Ashley looked at me pleadingly, clearly uncomfortable, but not knowing how to handle the situation. "We need to talk, Mom, about a lot of things." Jessica placed her purse on the table like someone marking territory. "We have nothing to talk about." "Oh no, how about how you sold the family home without telling us? How about how you disappeared for weeks without an explanation? How about the fact that you are acting completely irrational?" Irrational. I repeated the word slowly. "How interesting that you use the exact same terminology your lawyer used in the papers you filed with the court." Her face tensed for a fraction of a second before she regained her composure. "I filed those papers because I am genuinely worried about you. Any daughter would." "Any daughter who wanted to steal from her mother, you mean?" Ashley gasped. Greg shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Jessica, however, held my gaze. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Of course you do. I know about the lawyer you spoke to. I know about the plan to get guardianship over me. I know you planned to have me declared incompetent to take control of my assets. The only thing you didn't know is that I found out before you could do it." The silence that followed was thick-heavy. Diners at nearby tables had stopped talking and were watching us discreetly. The waiter heading toward us with coffee turned around. "You're paranoid," Jessica said finally. "That's exactly the kind of thinking that proves you need help. Imagining conspiracies. Believing your own family wants to hurt you." "It's not paranoia when it's true, and I didn't have to imagine it. I heard it straight from your mouth." Greg chimed in for the first time. "Deborah, I understand you're upset, but you need to see this from our perspective. You sold a property worth almost $200,000 without consulting anyone. You moved without leaving a forwarding address. You don't answer calls. This is disturbing behavior for someone your age." Disturbing behavior. It was my house bought with my money, built with my work. I didn't need to consult anyone to sell it. And I moved without leaving an address precisely because I knew you would come and do this. Manipulate me, pressure me, try to control me. "Nobody wants to control you, Mom." Jessica had switched to her sweet voice, the one she used when trying to convince me of something. "We just want what's best for you. You're our mother. We love you. If you loved me, you would respect my decisions. If you loved me, you wouldn't have hired a lawyer to plan how to strip me of my autonomy. That's your version of events, a version distorted by—" Jessica searched for the right words. "By your age, by the stress of living alone, by the natural confusion that comes with getting older. There it was again, the carefully constructed narrative. Every word chosen to paint a picture of a confused old woman, not an intelligent woman protecting what was hers. I am not confused, Jessica. I am more clear-headed than I have been in years, and what I see clearly is that you plan to rob me of everything under the pretext of caring for me. No one was going to rob you of anything. Jessica's voice rose. Several heads turned openly toward us. That house was your inheritance to us, to your family. You sold it and kept all the money. And there was the truth, finally undisguised. It was my money, Jessica, not your inheritance. Not until I die, and apparently you can't wait that long. Don't say that, that's horrible. Horrible. You know what's horrible, having your own daughter spy on you, plan to declare you incompetent, and hire corrupt lawyers to strip you of everything you worked 40 years to build. That's horrible. Greg leaned forward, hands clasped on the table. Look, Deborah, let's be practical. You sold the house. Fine. But that's a lot of money for someone your age to manage alone. You could get scammed. You could make bad investments. You could lose it all. Let us help you manage it. We can open a joint account. I can advise you on the investments. We'll make sure you're secure. Secure for who? For me or for you? For everyone. We're family. Family doesn't plan to betray each other. Jessica slammed her palm on the table, making the silverware rattle. Enough. This is ridiculous. Mom, you're coming with us. Right now. We're going to your apartment, you'll pack your things, and you'll come live with us where we can take care of you properly. I am not going anywhere with you. I'm not asking. I'm telling you. And I'm telling you you have no right over me. I am an adult woman of sound mind, and I make my own decisions. The hearing is in 5 days, Greg said. The judge is going to hear all the evidence we have. The neighbors from your old house who reported seeing you disoriented. The hospital staff who noticed changes in your behavior before you retired. It's all documented. Lies. Every word was a carefully planted lie. Testimonies they had probably fabricated or manipulated to build their case. Let them present whatever they want. I have my own evidence. Psychological evaluations proving my complete mental capacity. Reports from the social worker confirming I live independently without any problems. And above all, I have the truth. The truth? Jessica laughed bitterly. Your truth is that you're stubborn, refusing to accept that you need help. That's not the truth, Mom. That's your ego refusing to admit you can't do everything alone anymore. I stood up. Ashley immediately stood up too, placing herself at my side in a silent gesture of support. I've been doing things alone for 70 years, Jessica. I raised a daughter alone after your father died. I built a house alone. I made my way in a profession alone, and I will finish my days alone if it means keeping my dignity intact. Mom, please. For the first time, Jessica's voice trembled with something that might have been genuine emotion, or maybe it was just frustration that her plan had crumbled. It doesn't have to be this way. We can fix this. We can... You can? What? Can you stop trying to control me? Can you respect that I am the owner of my own life? No, Jessica. You can't, because you never saw me as a person with the right to choose. You only saw me as a resource you would eventually inherit. I took out my wallet and left 3 $20 bills on the table, enough to cover my bill and Ashley's, with a generous tip. Happy birthday to me, I said without emotion. Ashley, let's go. This isn't over, Greg said, standing up too. We're going to fight this to the end. Go ahead. But let me tell you something. While you were planning how to rob me, I was already protecting myself. The money is invested in accounts you can't touch. My apartment is held by an LLC that I am the sole beneficiary of, and I have clear legal instructions on what to do if you try to have me declared incompetent. That sounds like paranoia, Mom. Don't you see? It sounds like intelligence, honey, something you clearly underestimated in me. We walked out of the restaurant under the gaze of everyone present. The 5 days until the hearing were the longest of my life. Not out of fear, but out of anticipation of finally being able to speak my truth in front of someone with the authority to make Jessica and Greg understand that they had lost. My lawyer, Mr. Clark, prepared me thoroughly. We reviewed every detail of my case, every document, every piece of evidence. He taught me to remain calm, no matter what accusations they made, to answer with clarity and precision, to not let myself be emotionally provoked. "They are going to try to paint you as a confused and stubborn old woman," he warned me. "Their strategy depends on making the judge see you as someone incapable of rational decisions. You have to prove the exact opposite with every word you say." "That won't be hard. I just have to be myself." "Exactly. Be yourself." The woman who built a life from nothing, who worked 40 years as a nurse, who made smart decisions to protect her assets. That's the woman the judge needs to see. The morning of the hearing, I dressed carefully. A gray suit I had bought especially for the occasion, discreet but elegant. Comfortable but formal shoes. Light makeup that highlighted my face without exaggeration. I wanted to look exactly like what I was, a 70-year-old woman in full control of her faculties. I arrived at the courthouse half an hour early. Mr. Clark was already there reviewing documents in his briefcase. He greeted me with a reassuring smile. "Ready? More than ready." Jessica and Greg arrived 15 minutes later with their lawyer, a man in his 50s with an expensive suit and the expression of a shark. His name was Henry Fisher, according to his nameplate. They didn't look at me directly, but I could feel their eyes sizing me up, looking for any sign of weakness they could exploit. The courtroom was small, formal, with dark wood walls and the smell of old paper. The judge entered precisely on time, a man in his 60s with gray hair and thick glasses. He introduced himself as Judge Edward Hayes. "Good morning. We are here to evaluate the petition for temporary guardianship filed by Mrs. Jessica Miller over her mother, Mrs. Deborah Garza. We will proceed with testimony. Mr. Fisher, you may begin." Henry Fisher stood and began his presentation with a firm, authoritative voice. "Your Honor, we are here today because a concerned daughter has noticed alarming changes in her mother's behavior. Mrs. Deborah Garza, age 70, has made impulsive and irrational financial decisions that put her future well-being at risk. She sold her family property valued at nearly $200,000 without consulting her only family. She moved without leaving a contact address. She has cut off communication with her daughter. This is behavior that suggests cognitive decline and a need for supervision." I sat quietly, hands folded in my lap. Mr. Clark had warned me this would be their approach. Let them talk first, show their hand, before we presented our defense. "We have testimony from neighbors who reported erratic behavior. Mrs. Garza was seen wandering her neighborhood at odd hours. She seemed confused about what day it was. She forgot conversations she'd had just days before." Lies, all of them, but spoken with such conviction that someone who didn't know me might believe them. "Furthermore, Your Honor, social isolation is a classic symptom of mental decline in the elderly. Mrs. Garza has rejected all attempts by her family to help her to maintain contact, to even know where she lives. This rejection of family support is deeply troubling." The judge listened attentively, taking occasional notes. His expression was neutral, impossible to read. "We request that temporary guardianship be granted to my client to protect her mother's interests. This is not about controlling her. It is about ensuring that the decisions she makes are in her best interest and are supervised by someone who loves and cares for her." When he finished, the judge turned to Mr. Clark. "The defense." My lawyer stood up calmly, unhurried. "Your Honor, what we have just heard is a carefully constructed narrative to justify taking control of a perfectly capable woman's assets. My client is not a confused old woman. She is a retired professional with 40 years of experience as a nurse, with an impeccable history of managing her own affairs and with her mental capacity fully intact." He placed several documents on the judge's bench. "Here we have the psychological evaluation from Dr. Frank Evans, a board-certified forensic psychiatrist. The results show Mrs. Garza has cognitive abilities well above the average for her age. There is no sign of dementia, mental decline, or inability to make decisions." The judge reviewed the documents carefully. "We also have the report from social worker Sarah Harris, who visited my client's current residence and found her living completely independently in optimal conditions. Her apartment is clean, organized, and well-maintained. She manages her own finances, her own meals, and her own personal care without any difficulty." Mr. Clark paused, letting the information sink in. "The truth, Your Honor, is that Mrs. Garza discovered her daughter was planning to gain control of her assets, using the exact mechanism we're seeing today, a guardianship petition based on false claims of incapacity. She took intelligent, completely rational preventative steps to protect what is rightfully hers." "That's absurd," Henry Fisher interrupted. "My client would never—" The judge raised his hand. "Let him finish, Counselor." "Thank you, Your Honor. My client is willing to testify under oath about what she overheard, but beyond that, the facts speak for themselves. A woman who can plan and execute the sale of a property, who can research and move to a new appropriate residence, who can manage complex financial investments, is not a woman who needs a guardian. She is a woman who needs her family to respect her autonomy." The judge looked at me directly for the first time. "Mrs. Garza, I would like to hear from you. Can you explain to me in your own words why you sold your house?" I stood up. My voice came out firm, clear, and steady. "I sold it, Your Honor, because I heard my daughter and her husband planning exactly this. I heard a conversation where they discussed with a lawyer how to get guardianship over me, how to fabricate evidence of mental incapacity, how to take control of my property. I was not going to wait for them to execute that plan, so I protected myself." "That's a lie." Jessica jumped to her feet. "Mom, how can you say that? We would never do something like that." "Silence." The judge's voice was sharp. "Mrs. Miller, sit down. Mrs. Garza, please continue." "I worked for 40 years as a nurse at General Hospital. I raised my daughter alone after I was widowed. I bought land and built my house with my own money brick by brick. I defended that property in a lawsuit that cost me 2 years and $32,000. I am not a woman who makes impulsive decisions. Your Honor, every decision I have made in my life has been calculated and thought through." "And your daughter? You don't believe she could be genuinely worried about you. If she were genuinely worried, she would have respected my decision to sell. She would have asked how she could help me with the move. She would have celebrated that I secured my financial future. Instead, she hired a lawyer and filed for guardianship. Those are not the actions of a worried daughter, Your Honor. They are the actions of someone furious because they lost access to an inheritance they already considered theirs." The silence in the room was absolute. The judge studied me for a long moment. "Mr. Fisher, do you have concrete evidence of the mental decline you allege medical evaluations, documented reports, anything beyond anecdotal testimony?" Henry Fisher faltered for the first time. "Your Honor, we have the statements from neighbors who saw her confused." "Do you have sworn affidavits from these neighbors, verifiable names and contacts?" "We are in the process of— Or are these testimonies that your client relayed to you secondhand?" "Your Honor, it's common in these cases." "Answer the question, Counselor. Do you have verifiable sworn affidavits or not?" "Not at this time, Your Honor, but we can obtain them if given." The judge closed the folder in front of him with a sharp thud. The judge leaned back in his chair, looking back and forth between Jessica and me. Then he spoke in a voice that left no room for interpretation. "I have reviewed all the documentation presented. The psychological evaluation of Mrs. Deborah Garza shows full mental capacity. The social worker's report confirms she is living independently without any problems. Her financial records demonstrate she is managing her affairs responsibly. I see no concrete evidence whatsoever to justify a guardianship, not even a temporary one." Jessica went pale. Greg gripped the edge of the table. "What I do see," the judge continued, "is a 70-year-old woman who made intelligent decisions to protect her assets from what she perceived as a threat. Whether that perception is accurate or not, the fact is she had every legal right to sell her property move wherever she pleased and manage her money as she saw fit. She did not need anyone's permission." The judge looked directly at Jessica. "Mrs. Miller, I understand you may be worried about your mother, but worry is not a legal basis for stripping a competent person of their autonomy. Your mother has proven she is in full command of her faculties. This petition for guardianship is denied." The sound of the gavel echoed in the room like a final clap of thunder. "Case dismissed. You are excused." I walked out of that courthouse with my head held high. Jessica and Greg remained in their seats, frozen like statues, watching a world that had crumbled around them. I didn't turn back to look at them. I had nothing left to say. On the street, Mr. Clark shook my hand with a genuine smile. "You handled that perfectly, Mrs. Garza. It couldn't have gone better." "Thank you, Mr. Clark, for everything. What will you do now?" "Live, just live." And that's exactly what I did. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Jessica tried to contact me 3 more times during the first month after the hearing. Text messages that swung between begging and accusations. I ignored them all. Eventually, she stopped trying. Ashley visited me every couple of weeks. She told me Jessica and Greg had to move into a smaller apartment because they couldn't afford the rent on their previous house. That the kids asked about me, but Jessica told them Grandma is sick and can't have visitors. Another lie to add to her collection. "Doesn't it make you sad, Auntie? They're your grandkids." "It makes me sad they're being raised by someone who values money more than family, but I can't save them from that. I can only save myself." My life in the apartment settled into a comfortable, predictable routine. I woke up early, drank coffee watching the sunrise over the city. I went for walks in the park where I'd made friends, other women my age, who had also chosen independence over the false comfort of depending on their children. One of them, Brenda Edwards, told me her own story one afternoon over tea in her apartment. Her son had tried to put her in a nursing home to get her house. She had fought back, legally won, and now lived in the same building as me, 3 floors up. "Our children grew up in a time where everything was handed to them," she told me. "They don't understand the value of sacrifice, because they never had to make any. And when they see we have something, they don't. They don't think about working to get it. They think about how to take it from us." She was right. We had worked so hard to give them a better life that we forgot to teach them to value the effort behind it. With the money from the sale of my house after paying all the legal fees and setting up my investments, I was left with $155,000 well protected. The interest generated about $600 a month, which added to my $1,200 pension gave me $1,800 a month, more than enough to live comfortably. I signed up for painting classes at the community center. I discovered I had a talent for landscapes, especially capturing the sunset light on the mountains surrounding the city. My paintings started to decorate the walls of my apartment, replacing old photographs of a family that no longer existed in the way I had imagined. 1 year after the hearing, I received a letter. It was from Jessica. The handwriting was the same one I had known since she learned to write as a child, but the words were from a woman I no longer recognized. "Mom, I know I have no right to ask you for anything after everything that happened, but Greg and I are going through serious financial difficulties. The kids need school supplies, new uniforms. I am asking you not as your daughter, but as the mother of your grandchildren to please consider helping us, just this once." Just this once. The same words she had used dozens of times before. Just this once always turned into just one more time. And another, until there was nothing left. I tore up the letter without replying. 2 months later, I heard from Ashley that Jessica had gotten a part-time job as a receptionist at a dental office, that Greg had finally started selling insurance more seriously forced by real necessity instead of vague ambition, that they were learning slowly to live with what they had instead of what they expected to inherit. "Do you think she'll ever apologize?" Ashley asked me. "I don't know, and honestly, it doesn't matter anymore. I don't need her apology to live in peace. I found that peace on my own without expecting anything from anyone." On my 71st birthday, Ashley organized a small celebration in my apartment. Brenda and 3 other friends from the building came. We ate chocolate cake, drank wine, and laughed, recalling our legal and family battles like old warriors comparing scars from old wars. "To us," Brenda toasted, raising her glass, "to the women who refused to be invisible, who fought for what was theirs, who chose dignity over comfort." "To us," we all repeated. That night, alone in my apartment, I stood by the window looking at the city lights. 71 years old. 43 years since I was widowed. 70 years of learning that true love isn't shown with pretty words but with real respect. That family isn't just who shares your blood, but who respects your decisions. That getting older doesn't mean becoming invisible or incapable. It means accumulating enough wisdom to know when to protect yourself. I thought about the house I built, the bricks I laid one by one, the walls that watched my daughter grow. I thought about how I had feared losing it, how that fear almost paralyzed me. And I thought about how, in the end, losing it was what saved me. Because I discovered that what really mattered wasn't in those walls, it was in me, in my ability to get up one more time, in my determination to not let anyone, not even my own blood, strip me of my dignity. I touched the cold glass of the window with my fingers. 71 years old, and I was just now learning to live for myself. It wasn't too late. It's never too late to choose your own peace. My phone buzzed. It was a message from Ashley with a picture of my grandkids, beautiful, smiling, oblivious to all the battles that had been fought in their name. Maybe someday when they were older they would understand. Maybe they would come looking for me, and I would tell them this story. I would teach them that loving someone doesn't mean sacrificing yourself until you disappear. Or maybe not. Maybe this story would end here in this apartment with a 71-year-old woman looking out the window, holding a glass of wine, feeling freer than she had felt in decades. And that was enough, more than enough. It was everything.